Most people fear being alone. Yet solitude is not a weakness. It's a hidden superpower. History's greatest minds didn't find greatness in crowds. They found it in silence. When you look closely at the lives of the world's most influential thinkers, creators, and leaders, you'll see a pattern. Periods of deep solitude, of walking alone, of wrestling with their own thoughts. They didn't become exceptional because they followed the crowd. They became exceptional because, at some point, they broke away from it. They understood something that most people miss. That true strength, real creativity, and deep self-mastery are not born in noise, but in silence. In a world where being constantly busy, connected, and validated by others is considered normal, choosing to be alone and embracing that alone time is almost an act of rebellion. But it's a rebellion that can completely transform who you are. Today we're going to explore why solitude is not just important. It's necessary if you want to become unstoppable. We'll dive into the minds of three of history's most brilliant philosophers: Friedrich Nietzsche, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Arthur Schopenhauer. Each of them, in their own way, argued that solitude isn't something to run from. It's something to run toward. They believed that to truly know yourself, to think deeply, and to create anything of real value, you need to be able to step away from the noise of the world and sit quietly with yourself. Their ideas are not dry theories locked away in old books. They are practical tools, mindsets you can adopt today to change how you live, work, and think. Nietzsche taught us that to rise above the herd, to create your own path, you must be willing to walk alone. Emerson showed us that self-reliance isn't just about doing things yourself. It's about trusting your inner voice even when it goes against everyone else. And Schopenhauer warned that shallow socializing can actually weaken the mind, while solitude sharpens it. These are not just interesting ideas for philosophers, they are survival skills for modern life. In a world obsessed with constant connection, endless opinions, and 24/7 distraction, learning how to be content when you're alone is a real superpower. By the end of this video, you're going to have a deep understanding of why solitude is a critical ingredient in achieving anything truly meaningful. You'll see that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. Instead, it means gaining a level of independence and clarity that very few people ever achieve. You'll learn why people who can enjoy their own company are often the strongest, the most creative, and the most resilient. And even more importantly, you'll have practical strategies for how you can start embracing solitude today, not just in theory, but in your daily life. This isn't about abandoning the world, it's about learning to stand strong in it, unshaken, unafraid, and fully alive. So if you've ever felt afraid of being alone, or if you've ever wondered whether your time alone was wasted, stay with me. Because what you'll discover might just flip your whole perspective upside down, and open the door to a version of yourself you didn't even know existed. Today, more than ever before, being alone is seen as something strange, even scary. Modern culture tends to paint solitude as a problem that needs fixing. If you're alone, people assume something must be wrong with you. They assume you must be sad, broken, or unwanted. Movies, television, advertisements, they all quietly suggest that a good life is one surrounded by friends, parties, constant interaction, and endless activity. If you're spending Friday night by yourself instead of posting pictures with a group of smiling people, you might feel like you're doing something wrong. Being constantly surrounded by others is often presented as proof that you're happy, successful, and popular. And being alone, it's seen as proof that you're failing somehow. But that idea is a lie, a dangerous lie that keeps millions of people stuck, disconnected not just from others, but from themselves. The truth is, solitude and loneliness are two very different things. Loneliness is a feeling. It's the painful sense that you are disconnected, that you want company but don't have it. Solitude, on the other hand, is a choice. It's the decision to spend time with yourself because you recognize that your own mind, your own soul, deserves your attention. But our culture has blurred the line between the two. We've been trained to believe that any time spent alone must automatically be lonely, and that loneliness must automatically be something bad. Because of this conditioning, most people panic at the idea of being alone. They rush to fill every quiet moment with noise, with distractions, with other people, even if those people don't truly understand them. And in doing so, they miss the incredible power that comes from learning to enjoy their own company. This fear of being alone is made even worse by the world we live in today. We are constantly overstimulated. Notifications light up our phones every few minutes. Social media apps are designed to keep us endlessly scrolling, chasing likes, comments, and validation. Every spare second we have, waiting in line, sitting in traffic, eating lunch, is filled with something: a song, a video, a text message, a notification. We are rarely, if ever, just sitting quietly with ourselves anymore. It's almost as if being alone with our own thoughts has become a lost art. But it's not an accident, it's by design. The modern world profits from keeping us distracted. The longer we stay plugged into the noise, the less time we have to reflect, to question, to grow. This overstimulation creates an addiction to external validation. Instead of asking ourselves how we feel about something, we look to others for their approval. Instead of trusting our own experiences, we wait to see how many likes we get or how many people agree with us. Slowly, without realizing it, we hand over the steering wheel of our lives to the opinions of the crowd. And the more we depend on external validation, the more terrifying solitude becomes. Because in solitude, there is no audience. There are no likes, no retweets, no quick dopamine hits from notifications. There is only you. And if you've spent your whole life avoiding yourself, that can be a scary thing to face. The American philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson saw this problem coming a long time ago. In his famous essay Self-Reliance, he wrote, "Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members." What he meant is that society, even without meaning to, pressures individuals to conform, to think alike, to behave in ways that fit the group rather than honor their own unique spirit. And this pressure doesn't just happen through direct orders or rules, it happens silently, through expectations, trends, and judgments. It whispers, "Stay with the crowd, don't stand alone, don't think differently." Emerson's warning is even more true today. The constant stream of media, peer pressure, and digital noise conspires, not by force but by habit, to make us distrust ourselves and fear the silence of solitude. Modern psychology backs up what Emerson and the great philosophers understood instinctively. Studies show that constant social interaction can actually weaken self-awareness and critical thinking. When we are always connected to others, our thoughts start to blend with the group's thoughts. Instead of deeply considering what we believe, we react based on what is popular or acceptable at the moment. Researchers have found that people who spend excessive time on social media report lower levels of authentic self-esteem and higher levels of anxiety and depression. Why? Because they're basing their sense of worth on external feedback rather than internal truth. And without solitude, real, intentional solitude, it becomes almost impossible to hear your own inner voice through all the noise. Moreover, another fascinating psychological phenomenon occurs: groupthink. This happens when people, wanting to maintain harmony or avoid conflict, stop voicing their own opinions and start thinking the way the group thinks. It's easier, it's safer, but it kills originality, it suffocates creativity. When everyone thinks the same way, nobody is truly thinking at all. Solitude protects you from this. Solitude gives you the space to wrestle with ideas, to form your own judgments, to challenge assumptions, not because someone told you to, but because you arrived at those conclusions yourself. If you think about it, every major leap forward in human thought, art, science, and philosophy has come from individuals who dared to step outside the crowd and think independently. Einstein, Thoreau, Nietzsche, Da Vinci, they all spent significant periods of their lives alone, cultivating ideas that didn't fit neatly into the culture of their time. If they had been constantly surrounded by noise and distractions, if they had needed constant approval, would they have dared to think differently? Probably not. True originality requires solitude. The tragedy of modern life is that we've been sold the idea that solitude is something to fear, when in fact it is something to treasure. Overcoming the fear of being alone isn't just a small act of personal development, it's revolutionary. In a world that trains you to depend on the opinions of others, choosing solitude, choosing to sit quietly with your own mind, to explore your own soul without judgment, is one of the bravest things you can do. It's an act of rebellion against a culture that wants you constantly distracted and constantly conforming. It's the first step toward true freedom. And the beauty of it is this: solitude doesn't require you to move to a cabin in the woods or abandon society entirely. It starts in small moments. Putting your phone down when you're waiting in line, taking a walk without earbuds, sitting quietly with your thoughts before bed instead of scrolling. Little by little, you reclaim your mind. Little by little, you remember what it feels like to truly be yourself, not as others see you, but as you are when no one is watching. If you can learn to be alone, truly alone, not anxiously alone, you unlock a kind of strength most people never experience. You stop needing the approval of others. You stop fearing their judgment. You start living according to your own values, your own truth, and that, as we'll continue to see, is the path to becoming truly unstoppable. When we talk about solitude as a hidden superpower, there's perhaps no philosopher more powerful to bring into the conversation than Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche understood, better than almost anyone, that if you truly want to live a life of greatness, a life that is your own, you have to be willing to step away from the crowd. You have to be willing to walk alone. In fact, one of his most famous ideas, the concept of the Übermensch, or the Overman, is built entirely on this foundation. The Overman is not just someone who is strong or successful. The Overman is a human being who has transcended the shallow values of society, someone who doesn't just accept what is handed to them by culture, tradition, or popular opinion, but instead carves out their own values, their own path, and their own destiny. And Nietzsche believed that reaching this level of existence was impossible if you remained trapped inside the noise of the crowd. In one of his works, Nietzsche said, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." It's a simple sentence, but it cuts deep. If you don't develop the discipline to rule over yourself, your own thoughts, your own desires, your own life, then someone else will happily do it for you. Society, institutions, trends, and even well-meaning friends and family, they will all pull you in directions you didn't consciously choose. Without realizing it, you'll spend your life chasing after goals that were never truly yours, trying to fit into molds that were never designed for you. And the only way to avoid this fate is through solitude. You have to step away from the constant noise long enough to hear your own voice clearly. You have to be willing to disobey the crowd in order to obey yourself. For Nietzsche, solitude is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's the furnace where true individuality is forged. It's in solitude that you face the real you, stripped of the masks you wear for society, free from the expectations placed on you by others, and it's not always a comfortable experience. When you're truly alone, there's no one to blame for your failures, no one to impress with your talents, no one to distract you from your own doubts and weaknesses. You are forced to confront yourself honestly, and that confrontation can either break you or make you unbreakable. Nietzsche believed that this honest confrontation was essential. Only by facing yourself without illusions could you ever hope to become something greater. Nietzsche didn't just talk about solitude, he lived it. Throughout his life, he made deliberate choices to separate himself from mainstream society. He was not interested in fame, popularity, or approval. In fact, most of his ideas were either ignored or ridiculed during his lifetime. Nietzsche spent long periods living in relative isolation in small towns in Switzerland and Italy. He preferred long, solitary walks through the mountains over dinner parties or lectures. He often wrote that he needed the pure, raw silence of nature to think deeply, to create his works, and to maintain his mental clarity. His books, such as Thus Spoke Zarathustra, were not written in crowded coffee houses or busy lecture halls. They were born in solitude, carved out of the deep, silent conversations he had with himself while walking alone through the Swiss Alps. This self-imposed exile was not easy. Nietzsche struggled with poor health, loneliness, and the mental strain that comes from living outside the comfort of societal approval. But he understood that greatness has a price. If you want to think differently, you have to live differently. If you want to be free, you have to accept the burden of freedom. And that burden often includes being misunderstood, criticized, and even abandoned by others. Nietzsche's life is a testament to this reality. The path to becoming unstoppable is often a lonely one, but it's the only path that leads to real mastery of yourself and your life. One of the most powerful things Nietzsche teaches us is that solitude is not about hating others or rejecting society completely. It's about reaching a point where your sense of self is strong enough that you can engage with society on your own terms. You don't hide from the world. You step into it fully, but without being enslaved by it. You're no longer desperate for approval. You're no longer crushed by criticism. You are anchored in something deeper, your own self-defined values. And this kind of strength can only be built in solitude, in the hard, quiet moments when you have no one to impress, no one to lean on, no one to tell you what to do. Nietzsche also warned against what he called the herd mentality, the natural human instinct to think, feel, and act like the group around you. He believed that most people live and die as part of the herd, never questioning whether the values they live by are truly their own. They simply absorb the beliefs of their culture and follow the crowd because it's easier, it's safer, it's more comfortable. But comfort was never Nietzsche's goal. His goal was transformation, and transformation requires pain, struggle, and solitude. If you want to rise above the herd, if you want to become the creator of your own destiny, you must first be willing to walk away from the herd. You must have the courage to endure the temporary discomfort of isolation in order to achieve the permanent freedom of self-mastery. The beauty of Nietzsche's message is that solitude isn't just for philosophers, writers, or artists. It's for anyone who wants to live a life of real meaning. You don't have to disappear into the mountains for years. You don't have to reject everyone you know. You simply have to create enough space in your life where your own mind, your own soul, gets to speak clearly and powerfully. It could be as simple as an hour each morning spent reading, thinking, journaling, or walking alone without distractions. It could be turning off your phone in the evenings to sit quietly with your own thoughts. It's about learning to be your own companion, not because you hate people, but because you recognize that your growth, your strength, your greatness begins with you. In the end, Nietzsche believed that the path to becoming the overman, the highest version of yourself, is a path that must pass through solitude, not once, not temporarily, but consistently. Greatness isn't built in crowds. It's built in the quiet spaces where you wrestle with yourself, confront your fears, question your beliefs, and forge your own way forward. Solitude is the crucible where real inner strength is forged. And though it may sometimes feel lonely, it is also where the deepest, most lasting kind of power is born. The power to live life on your own terms, fully awake, fully alive, and completely free. When we think about the power of solitude, we can't ignore Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the greatest American philosophers and essayists. Emerson's philosophy of self-reliance is all about the radical idea that your intuition, your inner voice, is more trustworthy than the opinions of the world around you. At a time when people were already rushing to conform, to fit into neatly defined social boxes, Emerson stood up and said, "No. Trust yourself first." He believed that deep inside every individual there's a truth that's purer, wiser, and more powerful than anything society can offer. But the only way to hear it is to create space for it, and that space, once again, is solitude. In his famous essay, Self-Reliance, Emerson wrote, "Nothing can bring you peace but yourself." It's a short sentence, but it carries a massive truth. No amount of social approval, wealth, relationships, or external success can give you real peace if you're disconnected from your true self. You can surround yourself with hundreds of people, be loved by millions, and still feel empty inside if you're living according to someone else's standards. Real peace, the kind that stays with you through every season of life, only comes when you trust your own mind, when you listen to your own intuition, and when you live a life that is true to who you are, not who the world tells you to be. But trusting yourself isn't easy. From a young age, we're trained to seek approval. We learn to shape our behavior based on what gets praised and what gets punished. Over time, if we're not careful, our inner voice, that small, quiet voice that knows what we truly want and believe, gets drowned out by the louder voices of teachers, parents, media, and peers. We lose touch with what we genuinely feel and start living a second-hand life, a life built from borrowed opinions and second-guessed decisions. Emerson understood this deeply, and he knew that to reclaim your life, you had to return to solitude, to silence, where your true voice could finally be heard again. Solitude is not about disconnecting from society forever. Emerson didn't live as a hermit. He spoke to people, he gave lectures, he engaged with the world. But he approached the world from a position of inner clarity. He was rooted in himself first. Being alone, in Emerson's philosophy, wasn't about hating people or rejecting human connection. It was about making sure that when you did connect with others, you weren't just echoing their thoughts or pretending to be something you're not. Solitude wasn't isolation for Emerson. It was preparation. It was about finding your center so that when you stepped into society, you could engage authentically, powerfully, and without fear of losing yourself in the crowd. Emerson believed that every great idea, every true innovation, every genuine movement forward in the world began with an individual who dared to trust their own mind, even when everyone else thought they were wrong. It's easy to go along with the crowd. It's easy to believe what everyone else believes. It's hard to stand up and say, "I see things differently," especially when no one else agrees. But that's exactly what self-reliance demands. It demands that you build a strong enough relationship with your own mind that you can walk through the world without constantly looking over your shoulder, without constantly needing validation from others. And that strength, that deep, unshakable self-trust, is built in solitude. Imagine for a moment if every decision you made came from your own deep understanding, not from fear of judgment, not from pressure to conform. Imagine if you trusted yourself enough to choose your path, even when everyone else was walking a different road. That kind of inner freedom is rare, but it's possible. Emerson believed it was the highest kind of freedom a human being could achieve. But like anything valuable, it doesn't come easily. It requires practice. It requires time alone, listening to your own doubts, your own dreams, your own conscience, and learning to distinguish your real voice from the thousands of other voices you've absorbed over the years. In today's world, trusting yourself is harder than ever. We are bombarded with opinions, advice, and noise from the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep. Algorithms tell us what to think. Trending topics tell us what to care about. Likes and shares tell us what's worthy of attention. In this environment, finding your own authentic vision isn't just challenging, it's revolutionary. Taking time to be alone, to be silent, to reflect is an act of self-preservation. It's a way of protecting the most valuable thing you have, your mind. But solitude isn't just about protection, it's about creation. In solitude, your imagination wakes up. New ideas start to form. Questions that you've been avoiding begin to surface. You start to realize what truly matters to you. Not what you've been told should matter, but what actually stirs your heart. You reconnect with passions you might have forgotten. You start seeing paths you didn't notice before because you were too busy trying to keep up with everyone else. Solitude is the soil where your true vision can grow. And when you do step back into society, because eventually you will, you bring something precious with you: authenticity. You're not just reacting to the world anymore. You're contributing something original, something real, something deeply yours. Emerson's dream was not a world where everyone lived separately in cabins. His dream was a world where individuals, strong in themselves, came together not as mindless followers, but as true individuals. Sharing, building, creating from a place of genuine strength. A society of self-reliant individuals, each bringing their own light, rather than reflecting someone else's. The beautiful thing about self-reliance is that it doesn't require you to be perfect. Emerson wasn't talking about arrogance or stubbornness. He was talking about honest self-trust, the willingness to listen deeply to yourself, to make mistakes, to learn, and to keep moving forward without being crushed by the fear of disapproval. He was talking about living a life that is alive, vibrant, and real, not one that is secondhand or borrowed. In the end, self-reliance is about freedom, the freedom to be who you are, not who the world demands you to be. And that freedom begins in solitude. It begins when you have the courage to sit quietly with yourself, to listen without judgment, and to trust what you hear. It begins when you realize that the peace you've been chasing out in the world has been within you all along, waiting patiently for you to return to it. So as we move forward in this journey, remember Emerson's challenge. Dare to trust yourself. Dare to spend time alone. Dare to listen to the voice inside you that already knows the way, even if no one else around you sees it yet. Because in that voice lies your greatest strength, your clearest vision, and your truest peace. When we talk about solitude as a powerful tool for growth, it's impossible to ignore Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brilliant and most brutally honest philosophers in history. Schopenhauer had a very clear, very uncompromising view of solitude. He believed that true genius needs solitude like the body needs air. Without it, the mind gets polluted. Without it, original thought becomes almost impossible. In Schopenhauer's eyes, solitude wasn't just a nice thing to have once in a while. It was absolutely necessary if a person wanted to reach their highest potential. He knew that the deepest thoughts, the most profound insights, and the boldest ideas are born not in noisy rooms filled with shallow conversation, but in the quiet moments when a person stands alone with their own mind. One of Schopenhauer's most famous quotes captures his belief perfectly. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. In those few words, he reveals a profound truth. When we are constantly surrounded by other people, constantly exposed to their expectations, their judgments, their opinions, we naturally, almost automatically, start to adjust ourselves to fit. It doesn't happen because we're weak or fake. It happens because human beings are wired for social survival. We sense what others want from us, and without even thinking about it, we often bend ourselves to meet those unspoken demands. Over time, if we're not careful, we lose touch with who we really are. We forget what we truly think and feel. We become, little by little, reflections of the crowd instead of reflections of our true selves. Schopenhauer believed that this loss of authenticity was the death of genius. Original thought, the kind of thought that changes the world, can only happen when you are free from the pressures and expectations of the crowd. And the only way to be free from those pressures is to create distance, to step back, to be alone. In solitude, you can finally think thoughts that are yours, not recycled from the people around you. You can finally hear your own voice without it being drowned out by the endless noise of society. You can finally create something new, something that couldn't exist if you were constantly worrying about fitting in. But solitude isn't comfortable for everyone, and Schopenhauer was brutally honest about this too. He believed that mediocre minds fear solitude while great minds crave it. Mediocre minds, he said, are dependent on the crowd. They rely on constant conversation, constant entertainment, constant validation to keep themselves distracted from the uncomfortable task of facing their own thoughts. They fear silence because silence reveals the emptiness they have been trying to hide. Great minds, on the other hand, are not afraid of silence. They welcome it. They understand that solitude isn't a punishment, it's a gift. It's a rare and sacred opportunity to go deeper, to discover things that can only be found when you are completely alone. In today's world, this message is more important than ever. Shallow socialization is everywhere. We are constantly bombarded with opportunities to interact with others. But how deep are those interactions, really? A quick scroll through social media, a comment here, a like there, a brief conversation about the latest trend. These things give the illusion of connection, but they often leave us feeling emptier than before. They fill our minds with other people's opinions, other people's priorities, other people's distractions, and in the process, they drown out the deeper questions, the deeper dreams, the deeper creativity that lives within us. Schopenhauer warned against this kind of shallow existence. He believed that constantly seeking the company of others, constantly filling your mind with surface-level chatter, was dangerous, not because people are bad, but because the human mind needs quiet to grow. Just like a plant needs stillness and time to sink its roots deep into the earth, a mind needs stillness and solitude to grow deep, original thoughts. Without solitude, our thoughts remain shallow, reactive, and borrowed. With solitude, we have the chance to discover ideas that are truly our own. It's important to understand that Schopenhauer wasn't saying that human connection is worthless. He wasn't saying we should live our lives in total isolation. He was saying that if you want to bring something truly valuable into the world, whether it's a book, a business, a philosophy, a work of art, or simply a life lived with real integrity, you must spend time apart from the noise. You must cultivate your inner world before you can contribute anything meaningful to the outer world. Solitude isn't about rejecting people. It's about preparing yourself to offer something real when you do engage with them. Think about the greatest creators, thinkers, and leaders in history. How many of them spent long periods in solitude? Leonardo da Vinci spent countless hours alone sketching and thinking. Beethoven often wandered into the forest alone, letting the rhythms of nature inspire his music. Nikola Tesla, one of the most brilliant inventors in history, emphasized that being alone was critical for his creativity. These individuals didn't fear solitude. They embraced it because they understood that their best ideas needed room to breathe, room to unfold without interruption. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to be a world-famous genius to benefit from solitude. Anyone can tap into the creative, clarifying power of being alone. You don't need to run away from the world completely. You just need to create spaces in your life where you can hear your own thoughts clearly, where you can think without interruption, where you can explore ideas without worrying about how they'll be judged. Even small pockets of solitude, a quiet morning walk, an hour without your phone, a weekend afternoon spent journaling instead of scrolling, can create the space you need for deeper thinking and greater creativity. Solitude gives you the freedom to think your own thoughts, dream your own dreams, and build your own vision for your life. It protects you from being swept away by the latest trends or trapped in the shallow conversations that fill so much of modern life. It allows you to ask the big questions. Who am I really? What do I truly believe? What do I want to create, to contribute, to stand for? These are questions that can't be answered in a crowded room or through endless notifications. They can only be answered in the quiet, sacred space of solitude. Schopenhauer's message is clear. If you want to live deeply, if you want to think clearly, if you want to create something original and meaningful, you must embrace solitude, not fearfully, not resentfully, but joyfully, as a necessary part of your growth. Solitude is not a prison, it's a sanctuary. It's the place where your truest, strongest, most brilliant self has the chance to emerge. One of the greatest misunderstandings about solitude is that it's simply an emotional experience, that being alone is just about whether you feel good or bad, happy or sad. But if you look deeper, you realize that solitude is not just emotional, it's a psychological training ground. It's a place where real resilience is built, where mental toughness is forged. In solitude, without distractions, without external validation, without anyone to blame or depend on, you're finally faced with yourself, with all your fears, doubts, insecurities, and hidden weaknesses. And it's there, in that uncomfortable place, that real strength has the chance to grow. When you're alone, you can't hide behind excuses. You can't distract yourself with constant noise. You can't shift responsibility to others. The conversations you have are with yourself. The battles you fight are internal, and that is exactly why solitude is so powerful. It forces you to develop the muscles of courage, patience, endurance, and self-trust, not by accident, but by deliberate practice. Mental toughness isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. And like building physical strength, it requires resistance, struggle, and effort. Solitude provides the perfect environment for this kind of training because it strips away all the soft comforts and easy distractions we usually use to escape discomfort. One of the most powerful examples of finding strength in solitude comes from Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. Frankl endured years in Nazi concentration camps, separated from his family, stripped of his dignity, and reduced to the barest existence. Yet even in those horrific conditions, perhaps the ultimate form of forced isolation and suffering, Frankl discovered a deep, unbreakable truth. Even when everything else is taken from you, you still have the power to choose your response. You still have the freedom to find meaning. Frankl realized that life is not primarily about seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. It's about finding purpose. And often, that sense of purpose emerges most clearly when you are alone with your suffering, without distractions to numb you. In his book Man's Search for Meaning, Francha wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." This is the essence of solitude as a training ground for toughness. When you are alone and you realize that you cannot immediately change your external circumstances, when you can't just run away, distract yourself, or rely on someone else to fix it, you are challenged, perhaps for the first time, to truly change yourself. To face your fears, confront your pain, and forge a new kind of strength from the inside out. This is not something that happens when life is easy or when you're surrounded by comfort. It happens in the crucible of solitude. In contrast to this powerful reality, modern culture often pushes the myth that constant networking is the key to success. We are told that the more people you know, the more social events you attend, the more constantly connected you are, the better your life will be. And of course, building relationships is important. Human beings are social creatures. But when networking becomes a way to escape self-development, when it becomes an endless chase for validation, status, and distraction, it becomes dangerous. Knowing thousands of people won't help you if you don't know yourself. Being surrounded by crowds won't save you if you are hollow inside. True success, the kind that actually fulfills you rather than just impressing others, is built first in solitude, not in the crowd. Deep personal development doesn't happen at networking events. It happens in the quiet spaces when you're alone, wrestling with yourself. It happens when you sit down and ask yourself hard questions. Who am I really? What do I believe? What do I want my life to stand for? It happens when you face your fears without numbing them, when you endure boredom without desperately seeking entertainment, when you experience failure and instead of covering it up, you sit with it, learn from it, and become stronger. These moments don't make for flashy Instagram posts. They don't always come with quick rewards, but they are the foundation of lasting strength, confidence, and resilience. Learning to be your own company and actually enjoying it is like training a muscle. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, awkward, even painful. You might experience boredom, restlessness, self-doubt. You might be tempted to reach for your phone, to turn on some noise, to escape the quiet. But if you can resist that impulse, even for a little while, you start to discover something incredible. You realize that your own mind is far richer than you thought. You realize that you are capable of thinking deeper thoughts, feeling deeper emotions, and experiencing a richer kind of life when you give yourself the space to grow without interruption. At first, solitude might reveal your weaknesses, your impatience, your fear, your insecurity, but over time, it strengthens you. You become more patient because you learn to sit with yourself. You become more courageous because you face your fears head on. You become more self-sufficient because you stop relying on constant external stimulation to feel alive. Just like lifting weights makes your muscles sore before it makes them strong, being alone might make you uncomfortable before it makes you powerful. But if you keep training, if you keep showing up, the transformation is inevitable. And here's the beautiful part. Once you've developed real inner toughness through solitude, life gets easier in ways you might not expect. Criticism hurts less because you no longer need everyone's approval. Failure scares you less because you trust your ability to recover. Loneliness doesn't crush you because you know how to enjoy your own company. You stop chasing after shallow pleasures and start building a deeper kind of happiness, one that comes from within and can't be taken away by external circumstances. Ultimately, solitude trains you not just to survive hardship, but to thrive in it. It prepares you to handle the ups and downs of life with grace, courage, and resilience. It teaches you that you are enough, that you don't need constant affirmation from others to be valuable, that you don't need constant noise to feel alive. You realize that true strength isn't about never feeling fear or doubt. It's about being able to walk through fear and doubt without losing yourself. Solitude is not accidental loneliness. It's deliberate training. It's choosing again and again to face yourself fully, to trust yourself deeply, and to build a life that is anchored in inner strength rather than outer appearances. It's not about rejecting the world, but about preparing yourself to step into the world with a strength that comes from within, a strength that doesn't depend on how many people like you, praise you, or agree with you. In solitude, you don't just find your fears, you find your freedom. You don't just face your doubts, you build your destiny. You realize that everything you thought you needed from the outside world, approval, comfort, distraction, was never the source of real strength. The source of real strength has always been inside you, waiting patiently for you to claim it. After everything we've talked about, the power of solitude to build strength, creativity, resilience, and authenticity, it's natural to ask, how do I actually begin? How do you make solitude a real living part of your daily life? Especially when you're used to the constant buzz of notifications, conversations, and distractions. The answer is, you start small. You start in ways that feel manageable, even a little bit playful. You don't have to retreat into the woods for a year or disconnect from everyone you love. You just have to create little pockets of silence, moments of space where your mind and soul can breathe. One of the easiest and most powerful ways to begin is through something I like to call micro-solitude. Micro-solitude means carving out small, deliberate periods of quiet during your day. Moments when you're completely alone, without external noise or digital distractions. It could be as simple as taking a walk without your phone. No music, no podcasts, no texting while you stroll, just you, your steps, your breath, and your thoughts. At first it might feel strange, your mind might race, you might feel uncomfortable, but with time you'll notice something amazing. Your thoughts begin to slow down. Your mind starts to stretch and relax, like a muscle that's finally getting oxygen after being cramped. You can also create micro-solitude by starting your morning silently. Instead of immediately reaching for your phone, spend the first 15 or 30 minutes just being. Make a cup of coffee or tea. Sit by a window, watch the sunrise. Let your mind wake up naturally without being flooded with headlines, emails, or social media updates. These silent mornings act like a mental reset button. They give you clarity before the noise of the day invades your mind. Another simple but powerful practice is setting aside one no social media day each week. Pick a day, maybe Sunday, maybe Wednesday, and commit to staying completely off social media. No Instagram, no TikTok, no Twitter. Instead, use that time to be with yourself, to read, to reflect, to simply exist without constantly consuming. Once you're comfortable with these smaller practices, you can start building a deeper solitude practice, something more intentional and transformative. One of the most effective ways is through journaling. Journaling isn't just about recording what happened during your day. It's about creating a safe space where you can explore your own thoughts, your fears, your hopes, your confusions. It's a conversation with yourself. And over time, it becomes a mirror, showing you patterns in your thinking, helping you make sense of emotions that otherwise stay tangled and hidden. You don't have to write perfectly. You don't even have to make complete sentences. Just write whatever is real, whatever is alive inside you. Deep reflection is another cornerstone of embracing solitude. Instead of filling every quiet moment with tasks or entertainment, sit with big questions. Ask yourself things like, what truly matters to me? What am I avoiding in my life? What would I do if no one else's opinion mattered? You don't have to have perfect answers. The act of asking is powerful enough. Reflection, like solitude itself, doesn't demand immediate results. It simply invites you to dig deeper, to live more consciously. Philosophical reading can also be an incredible companion during your solitude practice, but not reading for information alone, reading to spark inner dialogue. Pick books that challenge you, that provoke you to think about life, meaning, purpose. Read a few pages, then close the book and sit with what you've read. Let the ideas ferment inside you. Ask yourself, do I agree? Do I disagree? Why? Great philosophical works aren't just meant to be understood, they're meant to be wrestled with. They are springboards into your own mind. Another practical and deeply transformative habit is developing a practice of self-dialogue. This means literally talking to yourself like you would to a close friend, not in a judgmental or critical way, but with curiosity and compassion. When you're faced with a difficult decision, ask yourself, what do I really want? What am I afraid of? What's holding me back? Speak out loud if you want, or write it down. What matters is that you're engaging directly with yourself, treating your own mind and emotions with respect instead of brushing them aside or drowning them out with noise. Of course, no discussion of solitude would be complete without addressing the feeling of loneliness. Sometimes, when we start spending more time alone, loneliness surfaces, and that can be scary. It's important to understand that feeling lonely and being alone are not the same thing. Feeling lonely usually means you are disconnected from meaning, from purpose, from your own sense of belonging, not necessarily from other people. You can be surrounded by a crowd and still feel lonelier than ever. True solitude, when practiced intentionally, actually reduces loneliness because it reconnects you to yourself. It fills the gap that no amount of external connection can ever fully fill. One way to think about this is to practice emotional alchemy, turning the raw material of loneliness into gold. Instead of running from lonely feelings, face them, sit with them, ask, what is this feeling trying to teach me? Maybe it's pointing out areas where you've been neglecting your own inner life. Maybe it's inviting you to create deeper connections, not just with others, but with yourself. Over time, the loneliness transforms. It becomes solitude. It becomes strength. Here are some simple, actionable steps you can start practicing today. Take a 30-minute solo walk every day. Leave your phone at home or keep it on airplane mode. Walk without a destination. Just observe, think, dream. Let your mind breathe. Commit to one no social media day per week. Use that day to read, to write, to think, to simply be. Notice how your mind feels different when it's not constantly bombarded. Schedule regular silent retreats or nature trips. You don't have to spend a month in the mountains. Even a single afternoon at a quiet park, sitting by a river, or hiking a trail alone can have a powerful effect on your mind. Nature naturally quiets the noise inside us. Create a quiet morning ritual. Start your day with 20-30 minutes of silence. No phone, no computer, no TV. Just you, your breath, and your thoughts. This simple habit can completely shift the energy of your day. Keep a self-dialogue journal. Ask yourself one hard question every day and write about it. Over time, you'll see yourself becoming clearer, stronger, and more centered. Practice sit and stare time. Literally set a timer for 10 minutes. Sit somewhere quietly and just stare at a tree, at the sky, at a blank wall. Let your mind settle. Let yourself be bored. Boredom is often the doorway to deeper thought. Remember, solitude is not something you have to earn. It's not a punishment you have to endure. It's a gift you can choose to open every day. A gift that reconnects you to your deepest self. Start small, stay consistent, trust the process. Over time, you will discover that the person you find in solitude isn't someone to be feared. It's someone to be celebrated. It's you, stronger, wiser, freer than you ever imagined. As we come to the end of this journey, I want you to remember something essential. Solitude is not just freedom from others, it's freedom for yourself. It's not about cutting yourself off from the world or rejecting connection. It's about creating a space where your soul can breathe without limits. It's about learning to stand fully in your own presence without needing the constant approval, distraction, or company of others to feel whole. In a world that constantly demands your attention, that constantly pulls at you to conform, perform, and belong, solitude is a revolutionary act. It's a return to your own mind, your own heart, your own sense of being. It's reclaiming the parts of yourself that get buried under noise and pressure. And in that quiet space, you rediscover a kind of freedom that nothing and no one can take away. The freedom to think your own thoughts, to create your own meaning, to live your own truth. I want to leave you with a final challenge, a real one, something you can act on today. Can you spend a full day without your phone? Without social media, without texting, without seeking any external validation, and simply be at peace with yourself? No scrolling, no distractions, just you and your mind, just you and your life. It might sound easy, it might sound terrifying, but if you try it, really try it, you'll discover just how powerful you truly are when you stop looking outward for strength and start finding it within. Every great individual in history, every thinker, every artist, every leader was willing to stand alone when necessary. They didn't wait for the crowd to approve before they dared to think differently, to create boldly, to live authentically. They understood that true greatness is not found in the noise of popularity. It's forged in the silence of solitude. As Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "The great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude." This is the ultimate test, not to run away from the world, but to remain centered, true and free within it. To move through life not desperately needing the crowd, but offering your strength to it, because you are already whole. So today I invite you, even if it's just for 10 minutes, to start practicing solitude. Take a quiet walk, sit silently by yourself, journal your thoughts. Watch the sunset without trying to capture it for social media. Create a small island of peace inside your busy day. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be long. It just has to be real. Because the more you practice standing alone, the more you'll discover that you were never truly alone. You were simply waiting to meet your strongest, truest self.